What if I told you there's a hidden pattern, like a secret blueprint, that connects the way a galaxy spirals to the design of a grand cathedral, and even to the way your own consciousness works? It sounds pretty out there, right? Well, today, we're diving into a really fascinating and ambitious framework called Crippin's theory, which is laid out in the Atlas Codex, and it proposes exactly that.
So, let's just start with that huge question. What on Earth could possibly be the common thread linking the spiral arms of a galaxy, the acoustics of a cathedral, and the very structure of our own thoughts and feelings? It sounds kind of impossible, doesn't it? Well, according to this theory, the answer is a single, universal pattern, a hidden geometry of balance that just repeats itself over and over across every scale of reality. Now, that is a bold claim for sure, so let's break down how it's all supposed to work. Okay, so at the absolute heart of this theory is a surprisingly simple idea, a universal language built from just 4 geometric shapes. But these aren't just, abstract symbols. The Atlas Codex says they represent the fundamental building blocks of how we think, how we feel, and how we grow. First up, we've got the triangle. Think of this as that aha moment. It's the spark of an idea, the point of a decision. It represents clarity and direction, that feeling of super focused attention when you suddenly get something or you finally decide on the path you're going to take. Next, we have the circle. And this is all about our emotional core. It's the loop of connection, of empathy, of continuity. You know that sense of wholeness we feel when we really connect with someone, or when we just find our own emotional balance? That's the circle.
And then there's the square. This is our foundation, our bedrock. It represents stability, structure, and safety. You can almost think of it as our brain's executive function, the part of us that creates systems, sets boundaries, and gives us that solid sense of being grounded and secure.
And finally, the spiral. This shape is all about growth and integration. It's not just about repeating the same cycles again and again, but expanding on them. This is where our past experiences get transformed into future wisdom. Honestly, you could almost think of it as neuroplasticity, but in geometric form.
So here's the crucial part. These shapes aren't random. They form a sequence. When you move from clarity, the triangle, to connection, the circle, then use that to establish stability, the square, and finally achieve growth, the spiral, what you get is what the theory calls a neurocognitive model of transformation. It's basically a map for how we process things, how we heal, and how we adapt.
So we have this really cool symbolic language. But how does it become something more, something predictive? Well, the next step takes us from geometry to mathematics, into what the theory calls the engine.
Now you might be thinking, okay, cool shapes, but that's just a metaphor, right? Well, the theory argues that this pattern of balance isn't just a nice idea or some philosophical concept. No, it says it's a measurable constant that can actually be expressed with a specific formula.
And here it is, the Atlas T equation. Now don't worry, we're going to break this right down. The equation says that T, which stands for a state of total balance, is the product of 3 key variables: P for proportion, the Greek letter kappa for phase, and R for resonance.
So what do those things actually mean in practice? Well, the best way to get it is to think about tuning a musical instrument. Proportion is like playing all the right notes. Phasing is playing them with the right timing. And resonance, that's the beautiful, harmonious sound you get when everything is perfectly in sync.
And this really gets to the core of the whole thing. This quote from the source material just captures it perfectly. Balance isn't this static, boring state of nothingness. It's a dynamic rhythm. It's a kind of dance that allows different, even opposing forces to coexist in total harmony.
So we have the language, and we have the engine. But how is any of this actually being used in the real world? Let's take a look at how this whole theory becomes a practical tool.
This is where the theory gets really interesting, because it's working on 2 levels at once. On one hand, it's this grand sweeping idea about a universal pattern. But on the other hand, it's being applied as a practical tool. It's powering a digital platform for self-reflection and even forming the basis for new kinds of research.
So this is the Atlas system. It's described as a neuro-symbolic interface, which is, a fancy way of saying it's a digital tool that uses symbols to help you understand your own mind. It takes that geometric language we just talked about, combines it with 12 core concepts like memory and vision, and uses them to guide you through a process of structured reflection, helping you find the patterns in your own life experiences.
And here's a super tangible example of how this theory could actually be tested. They proposed a 1-minute survey that asks people to map their current emotional state to one of the 4 shapes, pick a color that matches it, and then rate their feeling of balance. The whole idea is to see if consistent patterns start to emerge, basically building a bridge between our emotions and geometry.
Okay, so let's zoom back out from the practical stuff to the ultimate vision of this work, which really aims to connect all these different ideas into one single, powerful concept. This right here is where the theory makes its most ambitious claim. It's proposing that the very same mathematics used in engineering to tune an antenna, or that we see in nature in the spiral of a seashell, also describes the fundamental structure of empathy. It's a wild attempt to build a bridge between hard science and one of the deepest human experiences.
And this quote is just the powerful culmination of that entire idea. The geometry of empathy is the final equation. It reframes empathy not just as a feeling, but as a fundamental structural principle of the entire universe, one that can be understood and maybe, just maybe, even designed.
So, I guess we end on this question. If a universal pattern of balance really does connect physics, nature, and our own consciousness, what would it mean if we actually started using it on purpose? What if we could design our technology, our communities, and even our own ways of thinking on a foundation of harmony and balance? It's a fascinating and pretty big thought to leave you with.